The use of AI in creating drugs for both medicine and recreational reasons have the potential to completely revolutionize the way that we live. So, did you know that Viagra was initially discovered by accident? So it was a drug that was for angina, to try to relax the blood vessels around the heart. It turned out that some of the male patients in some of the clinical trials reported some surprising but not necessarily unwelcome side effects. It turns out that the drug also relaxed the blood vessels in another pretty crucial part of the body. The chemistry of the human body is complicated, insanely complicated. So in the human body, we have at least 10,000 different proteins, 100,000 miles of blood vessels, 39 trillion bacteria, 40 trillion cells, and 3.2 billion base pairs in the human genome. This means it's super difficult to find a drug that affects one part and not any of those billions of others. On top of that, some parts of the body, like the liver, like the immune system, and like the gut, are designed specifically to take some things out. So it's really difficult to find a drug that will do exactly the thing that you want, not affect anything else, and also is able to get past all of these barriers that the human body has in place. Which is why drug discovery has always been a really, really difficult process. Up until now, because we could be on the verge of an AI revolution that could turbocharge drug discovery and has the potential to cure everything. So the basic process of drug discovery hasn't really changed much in decades. First, you have to pick a target in the body that the drug could interact with, like a protein. You then need to find a molecule that will do something to that target, which is the drug. Next, you have to make the molecule in a lab, check that it actually does what it's designed to do and nothing else, and then finally test it in humans to see if it's both safe and effective. So for decades, chemists have screened drugs by putting different samples of the desired target into lots of tiny little compartments in a lab, then adding different molecules and watching for a reaction. But like I said, our bodies are complicated and they have masses of different ingredients. And so this can be an incredibly laborious process. Working in a test tube doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work in a human body. Doing computational models has also been around for a long time, but this was also a laborious process and it was difficult. So figuring out just how proteins are folded was one of the most difficult problems in biology up until DeepMind solved it with AlphaFold quite recently. And now machine learning models can take in vast amounts of data and they can create models that are really, really complex automatically. So this speeds the process up dramatically. It also means that they are now able to reason over these models much more easily. So NVIDIA and AstraZeneca have recently teamed up and they say that what they're essentially trying to do is to reason over the grammar of chemistry in the same way that ChatGPT reasons over the grammar of the English language. This is a real step change and it could lead to dramatic improvements in speed and efficiency. AstraZeneca now have access to one of the most powerful supercomputers in Europe. Sadly, none of this means that we're likely to be able to live forever. Our cells stop dividing, our DNA mutates. The human body has an estimated maximum life limit of about 120 years. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to be able to solve those problems too. With the help of these massively powerful AIs, I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that we might be able to. And in any case, people like Ray Kurzweil think that we might just be able to upload ourselves to a cyborg version or to a mainframe and be able to live forever as a compute consciousness. So, you know, whatever you think about Ray Kurzweil, I think a lot of his predictions are actually proving accurate, and who knows? We are in a brave new world. But not all drugs, in any case, are created for medical reasons. There are also some drugs that are created for fun. The University of British Columbia have recently designed a system which is designed to identify designer drugs before they hit the market. So drugs that mimic the effects of things like cocaine or heroin, but have a different chemical composition, and so they're not technically illegal. Now, these are obviously designed for law enforcement, rightly, and they're aimed at finding out, you know, whether people are taking psychoactive substances that aren't catalogued. But I don't think it's beyond the realms of the imagination to suggest that this might eventually be turned to the development of new recreational drugs, perhaps drugs that have a lot of upside and a lot less downside. Now, there would be a lot of regulatory catching up to do, but I do think that society is changing with regard to recreational drugs. There's much more legalization. There are obviously lots of other problems with that, and I think that we need to think carefully about the process of legalizing these drugs. But I also think that it's possible to imagine a world where society is much more okay with the controlled use of much safer psychoactive substances in medical and also recreational settings. Finally, there's 3D printing. So there are already 3D printers that can print drugs for medical purposes. One of them, called MediMaker, already works for rare diseases and metabolic disorders. So it's pretty feasible to imagine a future where we have drugs which work perfectly, are personalized exactly for us, have very few side effects, and we're able to print them out for ourselves in our own home. Now, that might sound like science fiction, but actually a lot of this technology is already there. Some of it's in its infancy, but some of it is actually quite well developed. So you can really imagine what this future might be like. We would be living for a lot longer, potentially far longer than the 120-year lifespan that we've roughly got now. But we would also be maintaining our youth for much longer. We'd have far less disease, and we'd also be able to have a lot more fun with a lot fewer side effects from those kind of recreational substances. So I think this is a pretty bright future, potentially, and I think it's one that we could potentially be excited about. But that's what I think. Tell me what you think in the comments.